Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agri. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. In this episode, I'm talking to Ben Lowe, National Forage Product Manager with Agri. Today, we're going to look into hybrid rye and the reasons as to why we should give this crop some very serious consideration, both as a feed and growing as a viable, profitable crop. So, good morning to you, Ben.
Good morning, Tony. Good to be with you again.
It certainly is. It's great to see you back here, Ben, and to hear more about how we can help livestock farmers and, of course, other farmers as well. So today we're going to talk about hybrid rye. So, could you share with us a little bit of a background as to this crop and, where it's used in the UK?
Yeah, for sure. So predominantly the main association with hybrid rye within the UK, Tony, I would say would be around the AD, anaerobic digestion market. It's a very popular crop, or has been over the last 15 to 20 years for AD, for producing large volumes of whole crop to balance the rations going into AD. But over the last few years, we have seen these developments with regards to growing rye and the other options for hybrid rye within the UK. In particular for grain production for the likes of livestock feed.
Yeah, because it's a really significant crop across Europe, isn't it?
Massively. The crop itself, is thousands of years old. Eastern Europeans have harnessed the benefits of rye within their, especially their bread flours. So we know rye bread is very popular across the continent. But those extra developments that we see the benefits from bread for human consumption, those same attributes are akin to the benefits that we see within livestock when fed to them from a grain point of view.
Yeah, no, I have to say, I'm a bit of a fan of rye breads, etc. I love it. I think it's great. So how come, it's not so popular over here?
Again, I think it's just that initial link from the utilizations of bread flours, our natural diet being that little bit more Western, maybe, for want of a better phrase. But the developments that we've seen in rye, they are probably 10, 15 years behind the Europeans. Europeans have really harnessed and utilizing grain rye in particular really strongly in the likes of pig feeding rations in particular. So we're just playing a little bit of catch up now in terms of working the benefits that they've seen into systems and farms within the UK and how that fits, not only from a feed point of view, but from a rotational point of view as to how this crop benefits arable farmers who are looking to find that other cereal within rotations.
Okay, so we've got the use for AD. In the digesters there. We've got the use for human consumption in breads, etc. And you're mentioning also the use as an animal feed, particularly for pigs, which I also understand is not just significant in Europe, but also in the US as well. What I'm hearing is that there's a real potential for growth here in the use of rye in the UK.
There really is. I mean, the initial sort of push that we had actually came from our growers who have grown hybrid rye, whether it be for themselves for AD or on contract for a local AD farm, AD business, saying, look, we see all these benefits of rye within the rotation. We just almost wish we could grow a bit more. Is there any other uses? We were already starting to pick up on the popularity of grain rye as a concept and utilizing in different ways. So this just tied in really well with, inclinations that we had and the conversations and questions that our growers are coming to us with. From a technical point of view, as Agri is well known for its R&D work for all arable crops and other forage species, rye is also part of those. We have had a hybrid rye screening program for probably the last at least 15 years now. Again, predominantly looking at varieties suitable for the UK for AD production, because we know, a lot of the early data, we were relying on that European data. That doesn't always translate, as we well know, for the UK climate and conditions that we're looking to grow in. So finding that best method to produce rye reliably, but then also now that's developed into options for grain. That could be grain-specific varieties. It could be multi-use varieties where a grower has the option of do you know what? I'm not going to take this for AD or for whole crop. I'm going to actually leave it for grain. And, you have got that ability to get 2 out of 1 if a plan changes, and have that flexibility.
Okay. So moving on to the benefits of rye as a feed for livestock, tell me, what's the benefit to the stock that we're feeding? How does it differ? Does it differ in its value?
It does. So 3 years ago, we ran a pig feeding trial. It was a replicated trial at Leeds University in conjunction with breeders and feed manufacturers, and the differences and the benefits are really quite stark. These were fed to pigs from a weaning to a finishing stage. The first sort of headline that was brought to us was the fact that these pigs that had rye within the ration were finishing anywhere between 4 to 6 days faster than anything else, which, in pig production is a massive saving in terms of time and turnaround. That was because they had higher daily live weight gains. There's other sort of benefits to rye which are behind the scenes, which is the most prominent one, I would say, is this factor that they would refer to as feeling fuller for longer. So rye really slows down the digestion process within the gut, and it actually means that not only the benefits that rye bring, whether that be starch degradability and so forth and energy, but it actually slows the gut down, and it also means that the other fractions of that concentrate or home mix and mill, the grower is actually getting more benefit from those other attributes, because previously without the rye, you only had a limited amount of time to get all the goodies out of those different feed fractions. But the rye is really slowing that down and bringing all the best characteristics out.
Sure, that's really, really interesting. And at the risk of me sounding, or actually not being, a nutritional specialist at all, does rye have any applications for ruminants?
So in relation to looking at feeding trials for ruminants, yes, I mean, it does straight away have benefits. Again, a lot of the data surrounding the application towards ruminants is mainly European or American. Again, we're looking to potentially develop a similar sort of feeding trial that we did with the pigs for the likes of ruminants, to see where that best fits. It's not to prove that it will, because we know it will. It's just how to best incorporate that within the likes of beef or dairy rations in particular, and probably sheep rations as well. Not only from an agronomic point of view, which I know we'll come on to shortly, but the biggest substitute within rations that we would first focus on would be barley within the rations. That's where we would look to replace or introduce the grain rye.
Okay, sure. But it certainly sounds to me that for the livestock unit, that there's maybe an opportunity there for home mix and milling as well.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if we look at the UK pig market, Tony, 50% are fed with bought-in compound feeds, and 50% are on home mix and mill rations. It's really quite stark. Those growers are growing the straights themselves at home, mixing and milling at home to then feed to their own pigs. There is big demand in a big market, and as we go forward, that supply chain level, looking at carbon footprints, things like that, it's only going to get tighter and tighter. And this is where rye, again, really, really sort of fits the bill for that.
Sounds like there's a real benefit for the livestock farmer there in terms of, use there. In terms of growing the crop then, we talked before today about some of the agronomic benefits in the rotation. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that could be really interesting.
So if we were to look at where we would fit rye within the rotation from the first step, where do we splice rye, hybrid rye for grain into the rotation? First port of call would be second wheats. So rye has a very, very high tolerance to take all, so it doesn't take on the overall effects that we associate second wheats with, or it would replace the likes of winter barley. Winter barley, we know, has limited options in terms of herbicide control for the likes of blackgrass and things like that, whereas rye, you have got more options. But of course, and I know we'll go on to the finer points of rye shortly again, but again, those growth attributes that rye has in the capability of controlling blackgrass is the main part.
Yeah, sure. And you also mentioned about its rooting capability as opposed to some of the other cereals. What's the difference there?
So rye has an extreme extreme rooting capability. Whether that be on drier, brashier, lighter ground, it becomes obviously very drought tolerant because of that rooting system. On soils that have become, a little bit overworked, just need that little bit extra body, finding that growers who are literally transforming soil types and profiles by having rye now within the rotation, by improving that physical structure of soil, getting that body back in there. And of course, that rooting ability is required for, you're looking at, a significant crop above ground. So it needs to be well anchored, and that rooting system's there to support that through times of stress, which, Mother Nature keeps throwing at us on quite a regular level now, Tony.
It does, and yet again this spring, we've got a dry spring, this spell right now. It's not that warm, isn't it? And we were talking there about growers putting maize in the ground to how the temperatures are still quite cold. And, yet again, Mother Nature, just as you said, throws these little challenges at us. You talked about above the ground, and of course, there's a real value in the straw here, isn't there?
Massively, massively. So, the benefits from hybrid rye from a whole crop point of view is, of course, significant levels of overall biomass. Taking these crops to grain, to final yield, that value is still there. When compared to likes of wheat or barley, you're looking on average of around about 2.5 tons per hectare of extra straw. A very, very high quality, valuable straw, which, again, is just another added, income stream from this crop, outside of the savings that it can bring.
Talking of that value, I'm going to put you on the point here because I know it's not an easy area, but how does the value of this crop financially stack up?
As we all know, to try and sit down and do costings at the moment, as we stand today, tomorrow, with such volatility within the market, is very hard to pin that tail on the donkey. The first one that we can highlight, though, is the efficiency of rye, and especially nitrogen efficiency. We've tended to find the sweet spot for nitrogen application of around about 100 to 120 kilos of N per hectare, whereas we know the likes of wheat in particular, benchmarks are normally 200 to 220 in many cases. So straight away, we can see a significant saving in terms of the N required to produce that crop at the other end. And this isn't, like I say, pulling back and having a lighter crop. This is all the crop needs to produce its full capability. From that side of, point of view, the gross margins, again, when we've had a much more stable market, we've seen gross margins above second wheats or winter barley ranging anywhere up to 80 to 100 pounds a hectare. Where that is when things are stable. But the benefits are huge in relation to the savings. And again, that nitrogen efficiency will always link back into the likes of our Green Horizons work that we do, looking at, carbon footprint, sustainability, environmental impacts. So it's a very green crop to grow.
Yeah, and that's very, very important. And, the Green Horizons initiative features very strongly in our podcast, and the elements that go with that to really help the farm take that step forward. What sort of yield would you expect rye to yield?
So rye yields, we would anticipate or benchmark around about 8 to 10 tonne a hectare. But it isn't unusual to have feedback from growers that they've done 12 tonne a hectare across the whole farm, or the area that they've grown. And of course, take that into equation to that extra 2 tonne, maybe 3 tonne of straw per hectare as well. We've got a crop that's really yielding here.
Sure. So, Ben, in terms of varieties, what sort of names should growers and farmers be listening out for when they talk to their agronomists?
Well, from, again, the trial work that we do, we've identified 3 core varieties, I would say, without going sort of too far down the rabbit hole. The first one would be SU Bendix. That was actually the variety which we utilised within our pig feeding trial that I've discussed. The second would be Helltop from Nordic Seeds. Again, predominantly an AD developed variety, but we do now know that it is capable and regularly used for the likes of grain production. And the third one would be a new variety for us from KWS in KWS Igor, performed very, very well within our internal trials, and also in the new AHDB data that is being formulated over the last few years.
That sounds great. And I understand that AHDB are starting a recommended list and trials. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's currently still as the descriptive list format, but as many farmers benefit from the likes of the Agri advisory list on an annual basis, we are also developing an advisory list from Agri in conjunction to the likes of the wheat and barley or seed rape that growers are used to, using on a daily basis.
You're talking about this crop with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. So, Ben, where in the UK is this crop best suited?
I think it would be a bit of a misperception that's attached to rye in many instances, where we associate the crop with very dry, brashy sort of type ground. Yes, that's where it would excel over other species, but that doesn't mean that's only where you should be growing rye. Rye is capable of growing on heavier ground, on more body ground. Of course, remember that winter vigor, that virulence that it has as a species, it's able to perform on both, heavy and dry ground alike. But at the end of the day, again, we can only limit the amount of curveballs that Mother Nature throws at us, but rye's up there with how many it's able to dodge.
Right, sounds really, really good. So, I mean, how does a farmer take those first steps if they haven't grown rye before, in terms of getting that information and starting to get that advice so that they can start, really planning whether this crop's going to fit within their system?
Well, luckily, as I say, Tony, we have got years and years worth of experience with rye, hybrid rye from a whole crop, or of course now a grain point of view. We have knowledge, we have sites all around the UK, as you know, that give that regional information back. We have varieties that fit different drilling slots as well. So we've again tailored, the selection of varieties that we work with to have that level of flexibility, and also then of course that relates to harvest dates as well. So it's basically just come and speak to us. I mean, there's going to be a lot of growers and a lot of farmers out there at the moment that have got questions about cropping, rotations, input costs. And actually, hybrid rye is one of the key solutions to a lot of those questions that we're being asked. And we do have a market for them. For those that are looking to grow the likes of grain rye for a buyback situation, we do have the options for that as well, that have become massively popular over the last 2 to 3 years. And as I said to you in the past, I do still stand by the comments I first made probably 2-3 years ago in an article that I did when we were launching rye from a grain point of view, that it does have the ability to become the third, maybe the second biggest cereal within the UK.
So just to bring all of that together, what would be your 2 top tips that listeners could take away today when it comes to thinking about hybrid rye?
It's hard to, with all the benefits that rye brings, it's hard to pin them down to 2, but I think we'll give it a go. Obviously, as I say, the likes of input cost, the cost of production are going to be key on growers' minds and within conversations and business plans going forward. As we've discussed, the reduced input costs that rye require, they are answering those questions, and that is something that needs to be really, really thought about in terms of the benefits it could bring to a business. And then the other sides of it are again, these environmental impacts that we have. Rye has this ability to shoulder a lot of those impacts. Again, the feedback that we get from first-time growers when we come out of a hard winter or a wet winter, saying, "Oh, wheats and barley is looking awful, but the rye is looking tremendous. It just never stops. It just keeps on going." And of course, from that point of view, again, weed suppression. When you do have the challenges ahead of you in relation to whether it be blackgrass or resistant ryegrass, hybrid rye has that ability to help you out from its own attributes rather than input costs.
Okay, well, thank you, Ben, for your very interesting thoughts on hybrid rye, a crop that perhaps we should have a much closer look at for our farm systems. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. If you have any questions you'd like us to ask the experts, email info@agri.co.uk. See you next time.